So the vision of Empower is to create a world where every individual is empowered to constantly grow. And that's obviously a very, very broad vision. Has nothing to do with what the company is doing, has nothing to do with how the company is doing it. It is only to do with why we're doing what we're doing. And basically, if you look at a consulting business, it's not very scalable. So you can only scale through the people you hire. But if you want to create a world where every individual is enabled to constantly grow, you have to find a way to do that.
Well, hello. It's Deandre here, and this is The Pioneers Show. The show where we talk with innovators, makers, entrepreneurs, basically people who are trailing their own trails and creating their own lives, so that we all can learn how to work on our own lives. This is episode 13, and I'm your host, André Dialker. You can find me at It's Deandre on Instagram and on Twitter as well as the show at Pioneers Show on Instagram. In this week's episode, we have with us Nicklas Teicke, the co-founder and COO of this incredible disruptive health startup, Doctorly. This has been one of my favorite conversations so far. I truly learned a lot about personal development, something that I share a passion for with Nicklas, venture building, and having a greater vision for a company. We go over the idea of Holacracy. Don't worry, you'll have a chance to hear what it is, Empower, and other ventures that Nicklas helped create. So, strap on and enjoy the conversation with Nicklas Teicke. Well, hello Nicklas, how are you?
Very good, thank you.
Oh no, thank you. Thank you for taking the time. It's very hot today in Berlin. Welcome to the Pioneers Show.
Thank you very much, pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you here. So, for people at home who don't know who you are, care to give us a 2-minute pitch about yourself?
Sure thing. My name is Nicklas Teicke. I am currently one of the co-founders of Doctorly. Previously, I founded a Salesforce consultancy called Empower, which is currently active in 5 different countries in Europe with over 50 consultants. Working with a very interesting organizational model called Holacracy. And other than that, I'm very much driven by challenges and possibility to grow myself, so pushing myself into uncomfortable situations to enhance personal development.
Interesting. Let's take it from that part of personal development, because I'm very personal development freak. Right. I like to think about how processes work, how can I do automation on myself, what books I can read. So was it always a passion of yours to be passionate, once again, about personal development?
I think it's something that you learn throughout your career or throughout your general life. In the beginning, you're not aware of it, but the only way for you to be truly motivated is by development. So if you are stuck in a situation where nothing around you moves, is it a job or a relationship or whatever, and things don't move, they're dead.
Like a shark.
I mean, not sure about the shark thing, but basically what I think is you function like an organism. If there is no tensions, there is no movement, it's a dead organism. And the only way to stay sharp on that is by focusing on your own personal development. The best way to do it is by putting yourself into uncomfortable situations, moving out of your comfort zone, and then enhance your skills.
So when you focus on your personal development, like you said, you just try and focus more on putting yourself through uncomfortable positions that make you try to evolve and adapt so you can also learn. Is that what?
I mean, that kind of is the ultimate result coming out of it. So forcing yourself into a position where you've never been in before, is it pitching to a VC, or is it speaking in front of 100 or 1,000 people? You come out stronger, and in the beginning you're shit scared of it, but then you've done it, you get used to it, and it becomes a normal thing. And next time you'll be stronger, and then you look for the next challenge.
Oh, that's very cool. I can share with you something that a lot of people in Portugal know about me. When I was in college, I used to say that I was going to rule the world.
All right.
And the plan has always been, and I've had this conversation with several people, that I know I'm not going to rule the world, but I don't want to feel like I made it eventually and feel like I've done everything. I want to feel like I'm always lacking and I'm going to die unsatisfied because I didn't achieve my goal, but I've always strived to achieve it. So that's why I always try to work on the personal development.
No, I mean, that's a super interesting aspect, because for me, I think I kind of define it the other way around. Like, my ultimate goal is to die happy, die satisfied. That's all you can wish for. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're rich, if you're poor, if you're known, if you're like a nobody. As long as you are satisfied, you're there. And that's really what it's all about.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I like your definition better, to be honest.
I mean, and this is one of the things that I've defined a couple of years ago for myself. Showing people how to find this kind of satisfaction is one of the things that motivates me quite a lot.
And how have you been working on that specific area? How is there any project, anything that you started doing on helping people define or be able to find those things?
Absolutely, which is my former business. It's called Empower. And basically the constellation of the founding team was very interesting. So it was people that grouped around my brother at that point of time, some people from work, some friends, and then me as a brother. And we started out trying to found a Salesforce consultancy. So we said, okay, we came from different startups all over Europe together and said, okay, well, Salesforce is such a powerful tool that we can use to really scale up businesses. But most of the businesses don't know how to use it. So what we're going to do is we're going to found a consultancy and we're going to show them how to utilize the Force.com platform to really build hyper-growth companies. And then as we started out, we noticed our differences and how hollow or how shallow our relationships were, and there was a lot of conflict. And then we looked for ways of how we can kind of surpass them. And in the beginning, you like literally stand in front of a whiteboard and be like, okay, this is my area, this is your area. You don't get the fuck into my area, and I stay out of yours, and that's it. And it obviously is a retarded way of doing it. And then at some point, as my brother sometimes has it, he has like every 2 weeks he calls and he's like super excited because he read this new book that's going to revolutionize everything. And one of them was called Holacracy. Well, actually, no, it was called Reinventing Organizations by Frédéric Laloux. And then through that, he came to Holacracy by Brian Robertson.
Found Holacracy.
Exactly. And he was like, this is amazing. We really, really, really need to do this. This is the future of organizations. And basically, just to give you a quick summary, it's a system of how you can basically hand over an organization into self-management by its employees. So you get rid of the managers and they just manage themselves.
Interesting.
And so then there was this opportunity to go to a seminar by Brian Robertson in Amsterdam at the moment. And he was like, hey, we got to go. It's next week. You and I take off a week, we go there. And I, like in this case, I was kind of like intrigued by his enthusiasm, read the book and we went there. And then during the seminar, I was like, well, that makes sense. And that would help us with that. And I really loved it. And coming back from it, I asked the consultancy if they can integrate, and it was like 35,000 euros or something. I was like, hey, fuck that, I'm going to do it myself. And basically, what we then did is we laid it out and started creating our own organization in Holacracy, which is a very simple concept. Really, is you have different roles. A role consists of a purpose, which is the defining goal of a role or the reason why it's there. You have a name, obviously, to identify it, and you have accountabilities. And accountabilities tell you what you can expect from a role from the outside. And then you have domains, which is the resources this role controls. A super simple example, you have a business analyst, as the role name. The purpose is understanding customers' businesses. Then you have the accountability to write, for example, a process diagram or whatever. So things that you can understand. But the really beautiful part about it is, number one, everything is explicit. So there's no inexplicity anymore. So I cannot expect anything of you which I have not communicated before.
Okay.
And what happens is, obviously, none of these things are perfect. But things like tensions arise, and tension is defined as a difference between what is and what should or could be. And then there's a process of how we integrate these tensions. It's called a governance meeting, where you basically work on the structure of the organization. Every employee is part of it, who is part of a role within that circle. And then they work on their tensions, and they resolve them. And by allowing everybody to process these tensions, everybody sees that they can make a difference in the structure of the entire organization. And that is already something that really engages people. They see they can make a difference, and they see they have something to say. And the second part is, you have now an organization which is not governed top down anymore. So you don't have anybody on the top saying, okay, well, I see the market is going in that direction. I see our customers repeatedly do this and this and this. You have all of a sudden brains everywhere. You have an organism that adapts to whatever the market situation requires because they see it firsthand and they can adapt to it. So basically you have like a self-optimizing organism, which is something which is, for me, super, super scary. Because what you do is you give away all of your power as a founder.
Yeah, I can assume you almost lose, I won't say credibility, but the credibility is not the right word, but almost authority as a founder.
Well, authority is an entirely different topic because there's such as like a natural authority.
I don't say authority in terms of domain authority. I say literally in authority as in you lose the power as the founder to say something or to have.
Exactly. I mean, what you give away is basically you let people do whatever they want and you fully trust them that what they want to do is what's right for the company. But if you treat the people right, they want to treat the company right. And therefore it becomes this symbiosis between employees and the company. And you expect them that they can actually work in a way that is responsible with the resources that the company has. And the main thing that you need for it is transparency. So everything within a company was transparent. Everything. So the money we made, the money we spent, the holidays taken, the salary everybody gets, the bonuses everybody gets, if there was anything like a bonus, which actually we got rid of. Everything that we have is transparent there.
That's for me, it's fascinating. And this is actually something that I was not expecting to talk, but there's a few businesses outside, and the one that comes to mind right away, for example, is Buffer. Buffer is a company that everything they do, it's very transparent in terms of pricing. So they have this awesome plan, and it's 12 years and a half, and they clearly chunk it down through, out of these 12 years, 7 is for salaries, 4 is for product, and my question is, as a founder, but at the same time as a worker in a specific company, how hard is it for you to be fully transparent, for example, in a salary where some people might say that as a founder, you might be able to get some more one month, more another month, less another month. How do you deal with said transparency, if there's some things that you should?
Yeah. With the salary in particular, I think you should always be transparent because people know. They know one way or another. I mean, even if it says in a contract that they're not allowed to talk about it, people always do. And if it's inexplicit, they can't talk about it. So if you're trying to keep it a secret, people will talk behind the back. And then they can't formulate their frustrations. And then this builds up. And therefore, put it out there. Just be super transparent with your salary structures. Because if they are unfair, you shouldn't have them. And then if they're not unfair, you shouldn't need to hide them. So for me, this is obviously the law sees it a little bit different because it is a private thing. Therefore, you need basically the approval of your employees to do that. But for me, that's the only way to really do it because otherwise you just build up frustration.
Is there any other case of companies doing the Holacracy method nowadays that are successful in?
I mean, I think the biggest example that there is Zappos.
Zappos, Tony Heisch, I think. Delivering happiness.
Exactly. It's what's his name again? Tony Hsieh.
Tony Hsieh, exactly.
Exactly. Tony Hsieh is his name. Yeah, and he was that was quite interesting because I talked to Brian Robinson about him, and basically what he said was he was looking at how to scale businesses without the marginal employee. So basically, the marginal employee is if you grow a company to a certain size, every additional employee makes the entire company and everybody within the company more and more productive until you reach the marginal employee. The marginal employee is basically the tipping point where now processes and friction between the people have tipped. So every additional employee now reduces the overall productivity or the average productivity of the people because there's too much bureaucracy in between. And so the really interesting thing is if you look at a city, it's the other way around. So a city at a certain size, every additional inhabitant makes the average inhabitant more productive. And he was looking for the reason why that is. And the reason he found is because within a city, people are self-managed. Nobody has to tell you that you have to go shopping. Nobody has to tell you that you have to go open a bank account. Nobody has to tell you that you need to go to the beach every once in a while, take some time off, because you know these things. And therefore, you can structure your time a lot more efficient. So what he was trying to find is an organizational structure that would allow him to make a company more like a city. And Holacracy is the one that he went with.
So Zappos is one example. Do you know any other example that?
Another one would be, for example, Dwarfs and Giants in Austria.
I don't know them, but
And then you would have, I think that Soul Bottles here in Berlin is also run on Holacracy. There's a couple, and it's spreading more and more. So some larger corporations are embracing Holacracy in some of their departments, for example. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to name any names because some of them are being consulted by us as well. It's
better not to mention. But okay, I have one question in terms of Holacracy. Holacracy. Fuck, I forgot. It's a weird word for me. Holacracy. If you put the power on the workers themselves to care more about the company, doesn't that at one point give a... I assume, and this is me assuming with not relevant experience working for bigger companies or with companies that have this kind of structure, but if you have if someone starts to feel like they need to be more engaged with the company because the company treats them very well and they have their own authority to make their own decisions, doesn't that create some kind of, how do I say it? Does that make some people redundant? Because maybe you got some people as managers to manage other people. Mm-hmm. If they're managing themselves, does that make those jobs or those roles redundant?
It's an interesting question. I think if you're a smart person, you'll never be redundant because basically you'll find other ways where you can add value. And therefore we didn't have anybody that we need to let go because we introduced Holacracy. Quite the opposite. We needed more and more people because now we had structures that allowed us to grow faster.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I just assume probably in the corporation world where you have probably thousands of people or hundreds of people at one point.
And there are examples of it where people are just, okay, now basically my old role profile is redundant. So what am I doing? So how do I start coordinating people? How do I get people to do what I want them to do within the system, within these set of rules that now certainly in a certain way put upon me. And you have people that have big troubles with it.
That's a very interesting, very, very interesting. I'll have to read that book because I think that whenever you talk about organizational ideas, I think that's very important. As not an entrepreneur myself right now, but as someone who one day might aspire to be, I think that's really interesting to know how I can make some kind of organizational structures from the get-go. I don't know if that's possible to go from the beginning of the culture or if that's something that you implement later.
I mean, you can. It's definitely easier if you do it from the beginning, but be prepared. The book is really, really boring. It's written by, I think he's either a lawyer or a programmer. And
so very objective, very,
exactly.
It's
very
A,
correct.
B, C.
It wasn't fun.
But reinventing organizations, that's an interesting book.
That is a really interesting book because it basically, Holacracy is one of the things they found out within the research for that book. So Frederic Laloux went to different organizations and looked at the way they organize themselves. And because he says that the way organizations are currently structured is they're doomed for failure because your environment has become so agile that with an organizational structure like most of the corporations have at the moment, you won't be able to adapt to any change from the outside world. So how can we reinvent the way organizations are structured? And that's what he set out to do, and Holacracy was one of the things that he found, among other things.
So going back more onto Empower, that's the name of the Salesforce consultancy company. Before going there, just one quick step back. Were you already experienced in Salesforce? I assume so because you had the nerve to say Salesforce, or you just...
Don't tell my first customers, but no.
You weren't, but the other founders were, I assume.
No.
No one was experienced in Salesforce.
We had 3 people who were.
How many were you when you began?
7 founders.
7 founders.
And 3 people who were, and I had a couple, like with a company I worked at before. It's called Lazara. I was among the very first employees. I think actually the first. And at some point it was like, okay, I was supposed to build up a sales team. It was my my first real job with long-term perspective. And I was like, okay, yeah, fine, I'll do that. And we didn't have a product. I didn't understand the vision, but it's an entirely different story. And at some point, I was like, okay, well, we need Salesforce, and Nick, you're just going to do it. And then, like, I sat down and we got Salesforce, and I had a look at it. I didn't understand anything. Then the founder of Outfittery, who was a friend of the founder of Zara, she came in and she was like, okay, I'll show you a couple of tweaks. So this is how you can do it here, this is how you can do it there, and this is how you have your standard sales process, and blah, 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 and this is how you can do automations, and I didn't understand any of it. And then, yeah, as I stayed at the company and Salesforce became more and more of a tool, I started using it, but I was not in a position where I knew Salesforce good enough
to teach it to other people.
So basically, I was inspired by the vision of the new company, and I wanted to be part of that. And therefore, I was also looking for a change and for a little bit more ownership. And then basically, I learned it on the job. But it was, it's exactly that, putting yourself in uncomfortable positions where you
but that must be a very uncomfortable position, no?
Absolutely.
To be selling that you know nothing, but that was actually something very interesting. My former managing director at Techstars Berlin said that as a consultant, you don't have to know everything, you just have to learn one more page than your client, and you'll be better than them already.
Yeah, more or less that's the case. I mean, if you just be honest. Like, sometimes you don't know things, and it's fine. Just to tell them. If you're smart, if you're up straight, if you're an honest and an authentic person, people are gonna take you, they're gonna take you serious. And then it's very easy to help them, because coming from an outside, looking into organizations, you always find things that you can improve, and you always find things and understand certain processes, and just ask questions, and then usually you'll find answers within them. And yeah, so basically I learned on the job, and then I think 3 months after we started, I was on stage at Cebit, talking about what we're doing without having any clue. And it was quite funny. It was like it's becoming a little bit of a trend when we start new businesses, that I have to do some stupid stuff at trade fairs. With Zara, for example, it was actually, we went to trade fairs trying to buy products without having a website, without having a real concept, without any, I didn't understand the vision or anything. So basically what we did is we went by from stall to stall and showed them a competitor's website, and we're like, it's us, and it's the products you see, and the discounts we give, and it's kind of the pricing range that we look for, and we need 20% margin, and just really bullshitting our way through it. And then when we got into more extreme or more concrete negotiations, it was like, okay, how many are you gonna buy? And we're like, 5. Yeah, and then luckily we managed to convince a couple of people to believe in us, so that was good. And then for the Cebit, the company at this stage wasn't called Empower, it was called Uberforce. And we were green, and then obviously Uber and Salesforce didn't like that very much. so eventually we need to change.
You managed to piss off 2 big behemoths.
Absolutely. We thought of Uber because they were just trying to put it down. But Salesforce was like, okay, if you guys want to go in a partnership with us, you have to check their name. So,
but for you to be able to be consultant for Salesforce, do you have to have a partnership with Salesforce?
Not necessarily, but it's very helpful, because essentially what they're going to do is they sell their product to customers, and then they need somebody to implement that product.
And that's what you were doing. You were doing the implementation. So your consultancy, it's consultancy in the part of implementation. Is it more engineering focused, or?
It's definitely implementation, yes. I mean, sometimes also optimization or cleanup, but mainly it's implementation. So coming into companies that are at a certain point in time where they really want to scale, where they become more professional. Rarely where they just start the company and you jump.
Because Salesforce is quite pricey for people who are starting.
It is. But so usually the way it goes is they start with a cheaper solution or no solution at all, and they want to switch to Salesforce, because Salesforce itself is very scalable.
But it's huge. One question now that I'll put your knowledge of Salesforce to the test, because I don't know personally. In its essence, Salesforce, it's a CRM, right? It's kind of a CRM.
That's where it started, definitely.
But it's no longer that?
I mean, it is. That's still its core functionality, but it can do much more. It's basically an operations platform for your company. So it can do much more than just a CRM. Just maybe to give you an overview of the process of what we do with the Salesforce that we've implemented in Empower is obviously we have the standard lead process, the accounts, opportunities. We have a casing system for complaints. We have our projects are completely on there. Our time tracking is completely on there. We generate our invoices completely out of that automatically.
So it's a managed business all-in-one solution.
More or less, you can build into that, and then we build our own in-house Airbnb on it, for example, where people can within the company put their flats in there. If somebody wants to visit another city, they can crash at theirs, or when they go away, they can put it to available, and then people will get notified if they want to be in touch with it.
That's incredible.
Super easy, man.
And how is it to manage? And this is a step to the side, but how hard is it to manage a distributed team? Is it all in Europe?
Yes.
How hard is it to manage a distributed team as a founder? A team of 7 founders? 7 founders.
7 founders, of which 4 have worked operationally. So 3 of them merged away from Empower relatively quickly, and I'll gladly tell you about the vision of Empower and the ecosystem of it. Mm-hmm. So they focus more on the ecosystem, and 4 of us were operating operationally. In the beginning, it was not super simple, but then it's all about engagement. So if people are abroad and engaged, mm-hmm. no problem. You will have difficulties in terms of culture. Maintaining a culture in a foreign location, mm-hmm. And adopting it to the culture that you've been growing in your home location, super difficult. That is a real challenge.
And was the main team here in Berlin?
Yeah, so the company was founded in Berlin. Berlin is still the largest office at the moment. Closely followed by the UK, who are doing a tremendous job. But the cultures are from all of the different offices very different.
So even though you're a doctorly, you're still managing it. You're just a shareholder right now?
Operationally, I'm completely out. I'm advising in certain aspects and helping on a couple of bigger projects, such as, for example, the ESOP plan that we just rolled out. Something that I help with, and then sometimes people have specific questions or just want a little bit of counseling, and I'll step in. So
you're a founder, more like a board of directors kind of thing. If there is something, you're there. You're an advisor for the company more than that.
Yeah,
right?
If you want to put it that way, yes.
Yeah, if I had to put a name, but I don't want to. Okay, even though I put it, I don't like putting names and things.
Course, yeah.
And focusing on this, because this is actually something that I find interesting in terms of consultancy for things you don't necessarily know, mm-hmm. or know much about. And you talked about Lazara, the previous company you worked at. How taxing is that on your mind? Because how taxing is it to know that you're bullshitting your way through something, and not calling you a bullshitter, but how taxing is it on your mind when you're doing sales for something that you don't believe in case of Lazara, for example, or you don't know enough? For Empower in the beginning, I assume now you're much more prolific in Salesforce.
It's super difficult. It stresses me out, to be honest. If you're in a situation where you have to convince somebody that you can make it, the best thing that you can do is to convince them of yourself. Be like, I'm going to do anything I can to make sure that what I'm explaining to you is going to happen. And then obviously the biggest problems that you have is if it's not within your power to make it happen. And that's usually the problem that lots of sales guys find themselves in. They promise you the world, but they don't deliver it because there's another team delivering it. Mm-hmm. And that's where a lot of the frustration also comes from. So, usually my goal is make them believe in yourself, and mm-hmm. then try to just be very honest and open and transparent about what you're doing. That's the most important part. Okay,
I think that's a good idea, and I hope everybody that's listening also takes into this, because I don't think that everybody who's working at a startup or a company or corporate or whatever, even though a startup is a company. Okay, let's scratch that. I believe that everyone who's working, not everybody might believe in the mission and might be going through some situations, mm-hmm. and knowing that it's taxing, but there's a way of managing it. And going on to an entrepreneurial venture can also be a good solution to start even taking your mind off something that might stress you. if it stresses you enough that you're not feeling very nice about that situation, do you think that creating something on the side can actually make your mind feel better?
I mean, for me, the work that you do at a startup has to be vision driven. If it is not vision driven, you won't be able to maintain going through a lot of shit. And as an entrepreneur, you have to do a lot of things you don't like. You have to go on a marathon of things that you do not want to do. This very bluntly, HR in the beginning, accounting in the beginning, things that distract you from what you want to do, what you set out with the company to do, but they have to get done. If you don't believe in the vision of the company, these things are going to tear you down more and more and more and more, and your motivation is going to suffer, and people are going to notice. And if you're not motivated, it's super hard to keep a motivation up in your team. And if they don't believe in the vision, then your company is doomed, in my perspective.
Stepping aside from Empower, let's go to the previously named Powerhouse. Powerhouse.
Exactly.
How did you go from a consultancy business in Salesforce, something very, I assume, technical, to building a co-working or to managing a co-working space? I assume that's a very weird turn and a very weird twist in the way you talk. Think.
Let me take 2 steps back, which is the vision of Empower.
Okay, Empower.
So the vision of Empower is to create a world where every individual is empowered to constantly grow. And that's obviously a very, very broad vision. Has nothing to do with what the company is doing. Has nothing to do with how the company is doing it. It is only to do with why we're doing what we're doing. And basically, if you look at a consulting business, it's not very scalable. So you can only scale through the people you hire. So you can't touch a lot of people's lives. But if you want to create a world where every individual is enabled to constantly grow, you have to find a way to do that. And so we extended the vision into creating a world where every individual is enabled to constantly grow by disrupting the way organizations operate while creating the leaders of tomorrow. So basically, what we do is we now have a school, we have a training camp, which is consultancy, which is one of the best things you can do because you go from project to project, you go into organization to organization, lots of times in startups where you get a lot of hands-on knowledge on how to run businesses. On the other hand, we're teaching people through Holacracy to self-manage, to be aware. We show and share all of the KPIs. We make them understand why these things are important. And then what we do is we allow them to found businesses themselves within the ecosystem of Empower. And that is then supported by the people at Empower, by the circle of investors that we've built. And what we needed to be able to be close was a co-working space. I personally was never really involved in the operational side of the co-working space, more as an advisor than anything else, but it's managed by 2 other people, which happen to be honest, my sister and my sister-in-law.
Okay, one step back before coming into the co-working space, because you touched a point that I was not expecting. In terms of educational part, do you have anything online that people can consume to learn, or is it on the consultancy part that whenever you reach a business that's incredible. So that's
the way you learn, right?
Of course.
On the job, put yourself in
a comfortable position
where you have to grow, and then you can help people by supporting them, by letting them feel that you support them in the decisions that they make, and that's the fastest way for you to grow.
So it's built on the premise that you'll use Salesforce from now on, or can, for example, imagine that I want to build my podcasting business. Can I hire you guys to make this grow into a hyper growth company?
Well, yeah, we can definitely operationally wise set you up, yeah. And currently, still based on Salesforce.
Of course, but is the idea that eventually can scale to other kinds of services?
Definitely. So one of the things that I'm 100% convinced of is if Salesforce would be turned off tomorrow, Empower would still be here in 10 years. We don't need Salesforce to survive. Salesforce is what we do. It is not why we do it. And we have an organizational structure that is so robust
Mm-hmm.
throughout Holacracy or through Holacracy that we can reorganize very quickly because we have a lot of smart brains within the company that can decide upon what's right to do.
Well, I really like that vision. Once again, to give you an idea, and I see the podcast myself as some tool to be able to know people, but it's a learning. I'm doing my own master's degree in these conversations. Mm-hmm. And I see the podcast as a tool for other people to learn themselves. And I think I truly respect and admire people who are doing stuff, even though you're doing consultancy, is something that helps people learn, either by listening proactively, passively, actively, or by doing stuff, putting their hands in the business and starting to create something. I truly enjoyed that vision. Congratulations. I think it's a very well thought out vision.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it came to us.
Totally unrelated, because of consultancy. As soon as you said consultancy, I thought, have you ever seen House of Flies?
No, I have not.
You should. It's a very fun...
House of Lies.
House of Lies is with Don Cheadle. I think it's over already. I think it ended in 2015. It's a Showtime. I think it's Showtime series on the bullshit that consultants do.
Oh yeah, holy shit! But we're a hands-on consultancy. We're not a strategic consultancy.
Yeah, they're strategic. They're strategic consultants, and it's one of those series where you have the fourth wall breakage.
Yeah.
So they say, now this is what I'm going to do, and Don Cheadle basically says something like, so whenever you're selling something, first of all, like kiss their ass. You're doing great. You're doing great. Whatever you're doing, keep doing. Now, put up the knife. But you should be doing this because this is happening. Da, 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 da. Now you confuse them with numbers. If your revenue growth goes, the tax revenue, and then you say, but this is all we can do, and basically just tell you can do what they're already doing. It's a very funny. It's based on a book also called The House of Lies. I think the book it's easier, but the TV series I was seeing it a few months ago, and I really like it a lot. So going back to the interview, focusing more on Doctorly now.
Yeah.
Let's now pitch Doctorly to the listeners of the Pioneer Show.
All right. Well, basically the way we set out was in the beginning. I knew that I didn't want to consult for a very long time anymore because you always get into a position where you go to a client and you say, hey, so we can do this and we can do this and we can do this and this and this and that'll be so cool. And then it'd be like, oh, I love it. And then, but we have to cut this and this and this and this and this because we don't have a budget for it. And then, okay, then you basically implement that, and then the ideas that you have cannot always be integrated the way you want. Sometimes you have like people who are resistant to consulting. So it's like, I've done this literally 100 times. You should do it this way because later on it's going to kick you in the ass. They were like, no, we should do it that way. So I knew that I wanted to build a product again, and I wanted to build something which has the potential to become huge, to really touch a lot of people's lives. So what happened is that I got to know through another company that is within the Empower ecosystem, it's WeFox, and One Insurance. I got to meet with one of my now co-founders, Samir El-Alami, and we talked about potentially building a business together, and then we were introduced to a brain surgeon and his wife, which he was very sick of having patients coming in not knowing anything about their own health. So at some point he was very close to operating a kidney which was already gone. And he was like, how the fuck could this person not know that? So his idea was to build basically a digital medical record for patients to give it into their own hands. And then what we did is we looked at the market, and I mean, from a consumer perspective, it's super simple. You have instant services, you have digitalized services in almost every key industry. So insurance, banking, food, travel, clothes, all of that you can do digitally. In Germany and most of the other European countries, if you go to a doctor's, you walk out with 5 papers in your hand.
Always.
Absolutely. So then we started looking at, okay, well, who is in that space? And we looked at the chatbots that are out there. We looked at the scheduling tools that are out there. We looked at the health trackers that are out there, at the health apps that are out there. And we noticed that from a consumer perspective, it's all kind of hollow. You know, it's just shallow. Shallow is the right word. It's never going really deep on where you want to go. And then basically this is where Achiko, our brain surgeon, came in, and he was like, he metaphorically turned, or actually not metaphorically, he actually turned the screen in the treatment room around. I was like, that's the shit we have to deal with. And it's terrible. The systems that our health industry runs on were to 95% designed in the early 90s and have not very much improved since then. So integration with them, very difficult. Communication between them, super difficult. User flows, absolutely horrible. So that's when we basically knew is before we can do anything cool for a patient, we have to help the doctor first. So this is why we're now building basically practice management software that allows doctors
management software.
Exactly, that allows doctors to schedule their patients, allows them to capture the digital, the treatment, the documentation of what they're doing. It allows them to do their billing, allows them to analyze the practice itself, the performance of the practice, the demographics of their patients. And then on top of that, we're building a patient app, which allows me now to not only obviously digitally book and have the integration, but I can now basically share and enrich my health record with my doctor, and vice versa. He can send me data about my own health record. So what diagnosis I have, what medication I should take.
And can you have previously exams, for example, MRIs, X-rays, everything onto that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So an X-ray or a doctor's letter or whatever you have, you can take a picture of it. If you have the real file, you can drop it in and then share it with your doctor on a limited time basis, or with a new doctor that has a system, or with a new doctor that you want to have a look at before, for example, you get the referral. And then afterwards withdraw all his access rights. These are things you can do.
That's very smart. I think that's something that's missing, at least since I moved to Berlin, but also when I was in Paris, I felt that a lot, is that it's very hard to digitally do stuff in the health space. In Portugal, since I had a private health insurance and was always at the same doctor, everyone had the same access because it was internal. And everything that I've ever done in Portugal, unless was when I ruptured a ligament, and I went to the public hospital because that's where the ambulance took me, it was always on the same place. So everyone had my records.
Okay.
But in Berlin, and it's very much distributed.
We move around a lot.
Yeah.
We go to different cities, we go to different places.
Yeah, and that. But is the idea to create like a holistic health record for both doctor and patient procedures and relationships?
Basically, we make it easier for you guys to communicate with each other. That's as simple as that.
So, for example, if I move tomorrow to London, in theory, if you go in, if you have Doctorly there implemented in several health facilities, I can just go, my Doctorly account is Andrea.Albuquerque or something like that, /Doctorly123. And they just...
Well, basically what you're going to do is you're going to make your appointment through the app, and then they already know that.
Okay, yeah, perfect. Yeah, then that's...
All you do is then select the documentation that you want to share with them. There you go.
Oh, that's ridiculously smart. I really like that a lot. Are you already doing pilots? Do you already have clients?
So basically, where we are at the moment is we're in, because it's obviously it's a regulated product. So we are.
It's RegTech.
Say again?
RegTech almost. It's regulatory.
I didn't even know that term. Yeah, it's RegTech. I'm gonna use that.
It's a fancy way of saying it. Whenever someone asks you, even investor, it's a RegTech health startup. You get some buzzwords, but good things onto the conversation.
That's cool. So we are in the process of getting it approved by the government. That's where we are at the moment. We have about 7 innovation practices, as we call them, who are practices that are accompanying us along the way. So they do tests with us. They look at the designs. They look at process flow. They explain us how certain things are working, who are ready to switch over to our system. So basically we do a pilot run with them before we officially launch, just to make sure that building a product, there is going to be bugs.
Of course.
Not any crucial bugs before we go live. Current plan is to start very early next year.
But is it the idea? I assume that the idea is to first start in Germany.
Yes.
And is it very localized? Does the regulation change a lot between cities?
Well, between cities, not at all.
It's only countries.
Exactly. Countries, yes. And then in countries, only the billing side. How do you bill a patient? What process do you go through?
What do you mean? Is it health insurance side? Is it customer
the
side?
Health insurance side goes into that. So basically, in Germany, we have two types of health insurance: is public and state. And private and state. And for private patients, there's no regulations basically. We could sell to private doctors right away.
Oh, so we're talking about doctors specifically now. So
exactly. I mean, these are the guys who bill you for the service that they do, right? And the question is, do they bill you? Do they bill the
health insurance?
The health insurance directly? Do they bill the KV, which is basically a mediator between health insurances and them? There is sometimes direct contracts with health insurances that they use as well. What do they use as the basis for their billing? So is there ciphers that they use? Are they just going to estimate on a time basis? That depends on the country. But things like practice organization, analytics, booking, all of these things are the same among everywhere else. The structure of a health record is pretty much the same everywhere. The only thing we need to tweak is billing.
And I assume the language.
Well, yes, but that's the easiest one.
Is it? I'm not trying to... No,
it's actually, yes. If the system is built multi-language, we do, obviously, since we have an international team, so we develop it in English.
Okay.
And then we translate it to German and translate it to another language.
But whenever someone types in something specifically health-related, do you have someone to... You mainly vet it, or will it be automatic translation?
No, so basically how doctors work is ICD-10 codes. So there are international codes for diseases.
Okay.
Which are, as it says, international.
Could they recognize any doctor, be it in Africa?
They're used everywhere. So basically the way they're used, they have like a JO 3.9, which is for tonsillitis, for example, is the same in Germany as it is in Spain or in Portugal, for example. The only thing that obviously in our system at the moment is different is that we have them with the German explanation. So it actually then says tonsillitis, acute, blah, 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 not further defined in German. But this is something, it's just a database that you import, which is universally accessible.
Sorry to interrupt, but is this going to be in an app format, or is it going to be a web app, or going to be, once again, holistic approach?
No, so basically it's going to be a platform later on. Right now, initially it was going to be a web app. But you run into a couple of problems with it. Number one is how do you connect devices to it? So for example, a card reader or an X-ray machine, how do you connect it to the cloud? It's a little bit difficult. And then the next one is that the German government for their state billing requires true end-to-end encryption. So the billing record needs to be encrypted on the device of the user. And you can't do that if you're cloud-based. So we decided to do a little bit of a pivot and create a basic program running on Windows, since 95% of the industry uses Windows. But we build it in a way we're using microservices that we can very easily switch it to a cloud version.
Whenever the market is...
No, we'll probably do that very soon. So
Okay.
we get this product accredited now, which will be for the billing purposes. And then we let people document with the same product, but in a cloud version. But then if they want to send the billing to the state, they have to do it from that one local computer.
Interesting. In terms of business development, how do you... So your company has to both sell to health insurances and hospitals or health practitioners?
No.
What's
What we do is we sell to practices. So it's a B2B2C business model.
So you go to the orthodontist...
We focus on GPs in a moment because they have
GPs being...
GPs, general practitioners.
Okay.
Which is...
like family doctors.
Exactly, family doctors, Hausärzte, like house doctors, I guess. Because they have the biggest spread, or they're the highest density of doctors, basically, within Germany. So of the 150,000 doctors' clinics that are within Germany, 40,000 of them are GPs. The rest is split among the other specialties.
And that's for now. And is it the idea? I assume that the idea is to eventually keep scaling up for other.
Absolutely. So basically, you can use the system to in a surgical practice, a pediatrician or a gynecologist, but we kind of want to give them, since we're a very process-based approach, so we want to optimize the process within the clinic. Is one of the things that all the other tools are missing, is we want to analyze the processes within these clinics and then give them solutions specifically
tailor-made
for their clinic.
So you have a product and you also do the consultancy side.
No. The product is the solution, but I don't want to sell a gynecology a product that was designed for a GP in a process flow, because, for example, you have the mother's book. Or for a pediatrician, you have certain curves that need to see for children. I want to have all of these things in before I sell it to them, because otherwise they just start working in two different systems. One is paper, because they have the Mutterschaftsbuch, it's called. It's like it's like a book for what did you get after you gave birth, to track the growth of your kid, to track the shots that your kid got, and so on and so forth.
Okay.
And you can always keep it with you when you go to a pediatrician or a gynecologist. So this needs to be digitized as well, among other things, obviously.
This last question I'm going to have you before we go on to the fire rounds is something that I've heard a lot of people from the non-entrepreneur, non-business side ask, or feel like they're at a disadvantage. Because I assume you don't have a tech background.
No, not at all.
But you keep finding yourself in tech-related ventures. Zara, I assume you said it's something on e-commerce or something.
Yeah, but they're the pure sales.
Empower, even though it's sales, it's some tech thing.
I mean, it's Salesforce, but yeah, there was basically a business analyst, more or less, an administrator. So hands-on consultant, full-on implementing Salesforce, which is easier than most people know. It's point and click in most of the times, so no code writing required, but you can do a lot of customization within the platform. But obviously it gives you a little bit of an understanding of how technology works. And
now on Doctorly, it's a little bit more. You assume you still have a very non-tech approach, but even though the product is very techy,
yeah, absolutely.
From what we were saying, I assume that your day-to-day operation as COO is not necessarily.
It's not technical, no. It's basically what I do is I currently act as a product owner. So I coordinate the design work, I coordinate the sprints for our development team. I make sure that they understand the requirements that we have from the state. I make sure they understand the requirements that we design in the process flow. And then obviously check off the tickets once they've been implemented. But from a technical perspective in that part, I'm not really involved, other than, somebody who understands a little bit about technology would do, like every younger person who's worked in a little bit of a tech orientation.
So for someone who's out there considering creating their own tech venture, creating a startup, and listens to this episode and he listens all the way through this part and says, this guy has no tech background, how the hell does he keep finding himself, even though some more sales positions, how the hell he found himself in a very niche reg-tech health startup tech world? How do you manage? Do you feel that not having a tech background ever put you at a disadvantage?
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. If I could restructure my CV, I wouldn't have studied business administration. I would have definitely studied computer science.
Really?
Absolutely.
Do you still think that not having that tech background nowadays, it's harming you? Or do you think that with the experience that you've managed to get all over these years have made you feel like even though you don't have a tech background, you can enter in the job space or in the career space of tech without feeling like you're unfit?
Very high level. Especially if I read through some of the requirements on how to treat data, like what information to take away from a database, technical documentations is very difficult for me to read. Definitely puts me at a slight disadvantage, which it could be overcome. But I think as a COO or as an operationally focused person, in the long run, it'll become less important, and actually the way the business is run is more important.
Okay. So thank you for that, by the way. And because as a non-tech person myself, I always feel like if I had studied programming or if I knew something more about it, I knew I could be more plug and play everywhere.
Yeah, that's definitely where it's going. Like, if there's anybody listening and thinking about what you should do with this life, and if you're generally like a person that's awake and conscious, definitely go into some of the computer direction, because it just opens so many doors. And business administration, the way at least it was taught at my university, which wasn't a very bad one, self-explanatory. All that they tried there was put you like into a position where you have to learn a lot in a very short period of time, and people then fail because it's too stressful for them. And then basically they send you through a hell of a lot of fire, and if you make it out the other end, you've shown that you can take fire. You've not learned anything.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest problems nowadays with educational system. We're being taught to be disposable, replaceable.
That's not necessarily what I.
No. I know that's not what you meant, but I think that not only that, but the fact that we're basically taught to be disposable. What I assume that what you said, and correct me if I'm wrong here, and I'm not trying to put words in you. It's that you have to do a lot of things in a small time. You get the experience of going through a lot of things, but applicable things in the real world are not necessarily things that you come up from that. You just show that in the last 5 years, I managed to survive and do projects. And what can you do? I have these projects.
Yeah, I mean, you mean like in like a kind of rural sense, like in a survival sense? Oh, I do like hiking a lot and living outdoors, so I can do quite a lot in that perspective. But yeah, from a business perspective, the main thing that you learn is how to work with people. That's the most important thing. In a position that I am in is, how do you communicate with people? How do you understand them? How do you show them that you support them? How do you connect with them? How do you motivate them? That is the toughest thing that you can do, and be authentic towards them, because otherwise you won't be able to ever lead a team if you're not authentic. If you put on this professional mask, then no, people won't believe you. It has a lot to do with natural leadership, definitely. I mean, if you're interested in education, check out what's his name, Sir Ken Robinson. He's already a bit older, Sir.
Like Mr. Sir?
Exactly, like he's a knight. That's why. Ken Robinson.
Ken Robinson?
Exactly. He's had a TED Talk. He published it when I was still in university, and it inspired me a lot, because he talks about the flaws of our educational system.
I'll take a look at it for sure.
Very cool.
So going on to the fire rounds, as you know, I'll ask you one question. One of these questions, two questions actually, I have just introduced today on my way here. All right. But I ask you one question, you have 1 minute to answer. Okay?
One word or a sentence?
1 minute. You can,
so I can put as many words
as you want during 1 minute.
All right, cool.
If you're a quick talker, that you don't seem like you're a slow talker, at least I know that you can add a lot of value here. So the first question is, depending on this first question, this is one answer. Are you a big book giver?
No.
Okay, so the question will be, what's the main book that's influenced you the most?
One of the books that I really loved was by Noah Gordon, called Medicus. Noah Gordon?
Gordon?
Medicus, which is, I think, was a book that inspired me when I was young. I think I read it 2 or 3 times. And from like a wow perspective, I mean, I like that book. I really liked Touching the Void. It was a very good book as well, by John Krakauer.
Okay. What's one tool you wouldn't be able to live without right now?
I want hardware or software?
Whatever.
One tool I wouldn't be able to live without is probably Asana.
Asana?
Yeah, I'm a little bit addicted to it. One of the books that I thought was great as well was Getting Things Done.
GTD.
Exactly. What's his name?
David Allen.
Allen, exactly, by David Allen. It's a great book, and I'm a very structured person, I'd say. So that helped me actually put the things that I wanted to structure in a kind of format that I wanted them to structure in. And Asana is helping me quite a lot because, like, every time I have a thought, I just put it in there. So it gives me a free space to in my head to actually think and not like store information there, use any of the capacity for storing. So you have to have a system that you trust, and currently that's Asana. So like making laundry, doing my like tax returns.
You have everything there. You have your whole life there.
Everything I do, like if I think I should go shopping today, I just put it in the shopping list. If I have to talk to one of my co-founders regarding the business plan, if I come across a requirement that I haven't anticipated and need to read more, I put that in there. If I remember in 6 months I need to give an update to this person again, I put that in there and let it pop up in 6 months. So currently there's a lot of information in there. So if that would go away,
you would feel it.
It's
not like Salesforce for Empower.
Problem, yes. I'd have a little bit of a problem.
Okay, tell me something you've changed your opinion in the last 6 months.
It's not so much a change of opinion, but it's something that really brought it to me again, is the importance of really like unconditional love and trust you can have even among friends. So one of my current co-founders is somebody who I got to know through Empower, and he's one of the person I trust the most at the moment, because I know like whatever I give him, he can somehow handle it, and we have a very, very good relationship with each other. So for him, I'm like super duper grateful. So this is something where just 2 weeks ago we were sitting here on a Saturday together, the two of us, and I was like, holy shit, I'm just so fucking lucky that I have this guy. So that was a very good thing. And then I changed my opinion. Vegemite. I quite like it now.
Vegemite.
I had it with avocado the other day, and it was actually not that bad. It was quite good.
Okay. If you're just finished, we already talked about it, so I don't need to ask this question. We're going to ask if you're just finishing college, what would you do? Probably focus. You already said probably do something in terms of computer programming.
Yeah, definitely as a basis, to have a basic understanding of how that works.
Do you have a life motto, or is there any quote that you like to think about or live by?
It's very interesting because I once did a session with some people at Empower of actually defining your life's vision or your life's goal. And I found it incredibly difficult to come up with something. But I think the words that kind of stuck to it is, as we talked already about it, is satisfaction, as being satisfied with what you do. And I really I really see by my purpose in life to help people find this kind of satisfaction. And the business is a very inspiring place to do that because of the personal growth. Because you push yourself to places where you are, through your growth, become very motivated, and you see the distance that you've walked and the changes that you've made to your own personality and to your own like consciousness, and that is something that I really, really enjoy. Like going back to this co-founder of mine now, seeing how he has developed over the last 4 years that we've spent together is mind-blowing.
Great. Tell me the worst advice you've ever received.
The worst advice I have ever received. Oof. I don't remember it specifically, But I remember when I was just finishing high school, I was sitting at my home, and I was coming back because after high school I went on a backpacking trip for 9 months, just traveling the world, and then I came back and I was super torn because I went to a business school as a high school, so I was focused on business, and then I was like, okay, am I gonna study business administrations, or am I gonna go study medicine? And I was that was the two paths, and I could see myself being in both, and I was very passionate about both. And I remember that I'm not going to name their names, but the parents of a friend came by, and I was just sitting there. I was like literally like sitting there and saying, "What the fuck am I going to do? Am I going to do this? Or am I going to do this?" And they came in to help me, but they were like everything they said. This was so plain uninspiring in either way that I was just like, what the fuck are you guys doing here? They were teachers, by the way. And I was like, yeah, you guys don't help me at all with the struggle that I'm in. There's like no advice I can take out of this. And yeah, I don't remember, I don't think they came to either conclusion or they did anything. And I think giving no advice is actually worse than giving a bad advice. It's sometimes because at least a bad advice, if you notice that it changes it, like it makes you at least think about the problem.
Okay, well, this is starting to get to the end of the interview. So 2 things. If someone wants to talk with you, where can they reach you?
Shoot me mail through Nicklas at doctorly.de.
So Nicklas, Nicklas.
That's correct.
At drly.de.
Exactly like the word doctorly.
Okay, so as a parting piece of guidance, is there anything that you'd like to give, a message that you'd like to give to the listeners of the Pioneer Show?
I think the most important part is be reflective of what you do, always. Don't hesitate to put yourself in uncomfortable positions. This is the major lesson that you learn throughout your life, is putting yourself into uncomfortable positions is going to make you grow. And that's the fastest way, the most efficient way you can do it. And only through growth you can be motivated and just live your life in happiness.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Nicklas. It was a great conversation. I really, truly enjoyed it. And I think this is my record in terms of time. I only like 2 seconds ago, I noticed that the light literally almost went out. And this is in Berlin, it's usually very late. I know that we had some technical difficulties here, but I truly enjoyed our conversation. Thank you very much for taking the time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you.
No, it was my pleasure. Well, have a great time. Thank you so much for plugging into this episode. I truly hope you loved this conversation as much as I did. Me and Nicklas sure had a great conversation, and I truly, truly enjoyed every second of this conversation, every moment that I spent editing, and every time that I've been with Nicklas since then. I can't stress enough how much I enjoyed talking with Nicklas. The Empower ecosystem is incredible, and Nicklas is, of course, awesome as well. I can't stop thinking about the idea of Holacracy, and I really want to read more about it and figure out if I can learn how to apply on other ideas I might have for the future. Doctorly has a great mission, and like in every person that we've had on the show so far, I hope to see it reach bigger heights than they ever imagined. Any information that you might have missed will probably be linked up in the show notes. If you enjoyed this conversation, consider subscribing to make sure that this podcast grows and we can get to more people and help everyone be the pioneers of their lives and careers. A big thank you to Nicklas Teicke for his time, and to DJ Rodia or Thibaut Flondlin for the music of the Pioneers Show. Once again, it was really, really, really a great pleasure having you over there. Have a great time. Talk to you later.